It seemed like the shooting went on forever. Every time I lift my head up to see what was going on around me, I was seeing people get shot, people getting mowed down, hostages, everything just getting mowed down. I put my head back down.
What's your feeling about what you know of the unfolding facts of Attica?
Nixon and Rockefeller wanted to maintain their power, so they were willing to lie, they were willing to cheat, they were willing to be heavy-handed, they were willing to infiltrate, they were willing to set up people to be killed, and they did that.
I think we were all pawns. Not just the inmates, the hostages, and all of our families, and anybody involved was a pawn to his own political expectations and the political control that they were able to express in the interpretation of this event. I think that the cover-up started as soon as the shooting started, and actually I think that the plan for the cover-up started before the shooting, before they ever opened fire.
I mean, we lived with this burden for 40 years, knowing that my brother was murdered, and that's it. That's it. How could something so tragic be covered up for so long? We're just a family.
My father, Billy Quinn, was a corrections officer at Attica State Prison. He was only 28 years old. We had a house at 11 Windsor Street in Attica. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My little sister and I had a dog, and we were living the American dream.
What we now know is that the FBI was on the scene from the very beginning, intensely reporting on what was happening. In fact, they were sending these reports all the way up the chain of command in the federal government, to every branch of the military, to the Attorney General, to the Vice President, and to the President of the United States himself.
I grew up in Attica, New York, which is a small town in upstate New York, a company town, so to speak, and the company was the Attica State Prison. Your dad, your uncles, your neighbors, and your friends' dads, they all worked at the prison. It isn't that different today. In 1971, many of the inmates came from large cities, which led to a real clash of cultures between the inmates and the guards. It was a time of turmoil and protest and violence. It was a very unsettling and sometimes frightening time for a lot of people.
Well, the conditions at Attica in the 60s and 70s were quite grim. The institution was built in the 30s. It was incredibly archaic. In fact, it looked in 1971 exactly the same as it looked in 1932. And it was an institution that was intensely overcrowded. There were far too many inmates squeezed into the institution, and the institution had, in many ways, made it extremely difficult to be there on a very human level.
Yes, we got one roll of toilet paper for a month. If you ran out of that toilet paper, you had to do what you had to do. There was a lot of fights in there behind people stealing toilet paper from one another, you know? Attica was a horrible place.
My brother, Elliot J. Barkley, also known as LD, was thrown into Attica State Prison for violating his parole for driving a car without a license.
Issues of crime and punishment were at the forefront of the national discussion. At Attica, the inmates were much more tuned into politics than ever before. They protested to the Commissioner of Corrections, Russell Oswald, about the conditions. The Corrections Union had disputes with the state about overcrowding. Commissioner Oswald promised to help, but changing these conditions in a place like Attica wasn't going to happen quickly, if at all. With President Nixon in the White House and Governor Rockefeller in Albany, politicians were very aware that the people in towns like mine were very concerned about maintaining law and order.